Russians are rapidly becoming poorer amid the war, but the Kremlin has found a simple way to explain why their utility bills have risen to historic highs. Thousands of paid bots on social networks tell Russians that this is not ruin but normal practice and their price for stability. Since June the 1st, housing and utilities tariffs in Russia have increased by almost 12% and in some regions more than 20%. For millions of citizens, this meant that utility bills were now eating up a significant portion of their income. However, in order to prevent the slightest doubt about the correctness of the course, the authorities launched digital propaganda in the usual vein. The Botnadzor project has established that almost every fifth comment under news about rising tariffs was left by Kremlin bots. In just a few days, bots published 2,048 messages claiming that price increases were an inevitable benefit. In the comments, Kremlin accounts engaged in rhetoric that makes it hard to decide what is more striking: cynicism or ingenuity. The increase in housing and communal services tariffs is not just a price increase, but a price for stability, one bot insisted with complete seriousness. Other commentators reported that everything was fine because salaries were indexed twice by 14%. This is probably why tens of millions of Russians never noticed this growth in their wallets. Bots working on regional topics try to create the impression that the price increases were not worth much attention, so tariffs, will go up everywhere. Why do they write about the region? One of them reported calmly. Another claimed that against the backdrop of rising salaries, this is not significant. Meanwhile, according to official data, in Perm-Krai, tariffs increased by 21%. In Arkhangelsk Oblast by 20% and Kemerovo Oblast by almost 20%. To give the situation an appearance of seriousness, Economic Development Minister Maxim Reshetnikov assured citizens that the tariffs were macroeconomically justified. First Deputy Chairman of the State Duma Committee Vladimir Koshelev attributed the increase to inflation and the need to update the infrastructure. Of course, none of the officials mentioned that at the same time, the state is sending billions to the war, and Russians are being offered the consolation of the fact that they are not paying for heat, but for economic greatness. When arguments run out, the Kremlin unleashes an army of bots to repeat the old mantra: be patient a little longer, because it's all for the sake of a brighter future. Russia, which once prided itself on being an energy power, now explains to its citizens that utility bills are higher than in Europe. This is the price of stability, and although many Russians are already struggling to make ends meet, in the eyes of propaganda, they must perceive this as a special honor.
In the Lviv region, officers of the Security Service of Ukraine detained a major of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, who turned out to be an agent of the Russian Special Service. He was charged with high treason, the SBU press service reports. According to the investigation, the major was recruited by Russians through his ex-wife, who works for the FSB, Russia's Federal Security Service in temporarily occupied Melitopol. Major's main task was to collect information about Ukrainian military aviation. In particular, the Russians tried to obtain coordinates of operational airfields, logistics hubs, and maintenance centers for combat aircraft of the armed forces. The subversive activities of the spy were coordinated by Alexander Bolodidov, a career officer of the Alpha Special Operations Department of the FSB. In case they obtained the relevant geolocations, the occupiers hoped to launch missile and drone strikes on them, the statement says. The SBU noted that they detected the traitor in time, documented his contacts with FSB representatives, and conducted a set of measures to secure the disclosed locations. Based on the evidence collected, the officer has been formally charged under Part 2 of Article 28 and Part 2 of Article 111 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine, high treason committed by a group of individuals under martial law. He is currently in custody and faces a potential life sentence with confiscation of property. His ex-wife, now located in temporarily occupied southern Ukraine, has also been charged in absentia with treason. Recently, among the military, a traitor was exposed who was preparing a Russian attack on Ukrainian Neptune anti-ship missile systems. He was also supposed to adjust enemy strikes on armed forces training centers. In addition, counterintelligence of the Security Service of Ukraine exposed and detained in Kiev an agent of Russian military intelligence. Earlier, the SBU also detained an FSB agent who was preparing missile strikes on armed forces airfields in western Ukraine. The Security Service of Ukraine has liquidated Manolis Pilavov, the former head of the city's occupation administration, who headed it from 2014 to 2023, in the temporarily occupied Luhansk. He died as a result of an explosive device explosion. Pilavov was one of the ideologists of the so-called Lugansk People's Republic, an associate of Igor Plotnitsky. It is noted that since 2015, the so-called head of the Luhansk administration has been wanted under Article 109 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine, actions aimed at the violent change or overthrow of the constitutional order, seizure of state power, and since 2022, he has been under Ukrainian sanctions. Dozens of people paid tribute to a prominent Ukrainian Air Force pilot on Thursday by attending his funeral service in St. Michael Church in Kyiv. According to Associated Press, 32-year-old Maxim Ustimenko was killed during a combat mission on the night of June 29, when he was repelling one of Russia's largest attacks on Ukraine. His F-16 was damaged after shooting down 7 Shahid's drones. Maxim fulfilled the greatest commandment of God, not sparing his own life. He saved not dozens, but probably hundreds of other lives, said military chaplain Dmytro Przyazny during the funeral service in St. Michael Church. Maxim Ustimenko managed to take the plane away from the settlement and avoid casualties, but died before he could eject. For this act of self-sacrifice he was posthumously awarded with the highest state reward, Hero of Ukraine. To divert an already damaged plane from a populated area and continue to fly this plane is a very difficult task. But the pilot did it. He is truly a hero, said Deputy Commander of the Air Command, West, Brigadier General of Ukraine Air Force Ola Zakharchuk. Ola Zakharchuk, who was also a teacher of Ustimenko, described him as an excellent pilot, capable at fulfilling the most complex missions. When they had to work all day and then repel attacks at night, Ustimenko was the first to be sent to perform this task because he was the one who could fulfill them, said Zakharchuk. At the time of the full-scale invasion, Maxim Ustimenko was training abroad and immediately returned to his unit to perform his duty. Ustimenko was the first pilot who shot down cruise missiles over Kiev in the beginning of full-scale invasion. He was a new generation pilot who was trained to become a pilot of F-16. He spoke with enthusiasm about the F-16 plane, as a powerful machine that must be used at full power. Maxim was one of those pilots who did this, said Zakharchuk. Maxim Ustimenko had wife and a son.